I would like to warmly welcome Dr. Allison Cox, the Director of Berry Street's Take Two program. Take Two provides therapeutic services to children impacted by child abuse, neglect, family violence, and other forms of child maltreatment. And we've become much more aware and cognizant of child maltreatment since the Australian Child Maltreatment Study, which I hope you've all read and know about. Dr. Cox has a background in occupational therapy and extensive experience in child and adolescent mental health. We've invited Dr. Cox here today as we know that our specialist AVITH practitioners report that many of the young people they work with are neurodivergent. Dr. Cox will ask us to consider how we reconceptualise this practice issue to bring about change in language, prevention and response. Can we please give Alison a really warm welcome?
I would also like to acknowledge that we meet today on the lands of Wurundjeri people, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as any Aboriginal people that are joining us today. I'd like to pay my respects of the amazing care of our lands, waterways, mountains and rivers over an incredibly long period of time. And it's such a privilege to live on the lands amongst the longest living culture on the earth. So Take Two, as Deb introduced, we're a program that sits under the umbrella of Berry Street. We've been in operation now for over 20 years, and we bring a strong trauma-informed lens to our work with children, adolescents and their families and the broader system, where they're displaying usually mental health difficulties as a result of what's gone on in their lives. And that's the context that I'll bring to our thinking today. We have a really strong neurodevelopmental approach to the way in which we work. Most of the children that we work with have experienced significant adversity at some degree. They'll have experiences of abuse, disrupted attachment, trauma, family violence, and often all of those things at the same time within the one family environment and over extended periods of time. So these sorts of phrases are things that I'm sure you feel very familiar with. They're often the ways that adults will describe how young people present, often in your referral documents, in when you have your first phone calls with referrers, with parents, and often not a lot of things that are around positive attributes or strengths of the young person. What we usually hear first is about the way in which these young people are proving a challenge to others. And that's the way that they come in. And they're often the first impressions that are shared with us about the young people. And of course, that can colour the way that we think about them. And I know one of the complaints that I received a little while ago from a young person, and I'm always delighted to hear from young people and their voices, and real power to this young person that they made a complaint. And one of the things that they made a complaint about was that we'd met with their parents first before we'd met with them, and that they felt that what that meant was that we heard the parents' lens on who they were, without actually hearing about them and getting to know them first. And it was a really important reminder. And as we know, we learn the most from the people that we work with about the importance of hearing from young people themselves about what's going on for them. So I wanted to share a little bit about a young person's story. This is a de-identified story. It's a collation of various stories, so won't be identifiable, but will be recognisable, I think, in terms of the similarities for some of the young people that you work with. And I think just picking up on one of the things Deb said before, she talked about children, she talked about young people. And the other thing that I'm really conscious of is the age range of the children that we work with. So I'm going to talk with you about a 12-year-old, but we'll also be working with 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. The development that happens between 12 and 18 is phenomenal. It is the second biggest period of growth in a young person's life. So we know the biggest period of growth is in 0 to 3 years, lots of synapses, lots of development going on. Adolescence is a similar incredible period of development. That's challenging for young people. It's challenging for those around them. but it also means there's amazing opportunities because there is so much growth happening for these young people. So Justin is a 12-year-old boy. He came into contact with Child Protection and the Orange Door because his parents were requesting to relinquish care of him due to his ongoing aggressive behaviours at home and his threats to kill his younger sister. He lives in his family home with his mother Louise and his stepfather Jason and his two younger sisters, aged 10 and 7. He's very quick to escalate to aggressive behaviours. He yells, he threatens, he destructs property, he punches holes in walls, he breaks things, he breaks his sister's toys. A consistent trigger for escalation in his behaviour is around his PlayStation use, and I'm sure this is familiar for lots of you. It's not uncommon for him to be playing video games into the early hours of the morning. His parents report that at times he can be really quiet and polite, and that's the Justin that they remember as a little boy. And sometimes they'll talk about, we feel like he's back. And then they'll ask him to stop playing the PlayStation, and the other Justin comes to the fore. He's not only been doing some aggressive, dangerous behaviours at home, he's also been doing them in the community. And so he's actually got some court charges pending as well due to property damage and destruction in the environment. And that's bringing a lot of shame on the parents. They're not talking so much about the shame on him, but they're feeling a lot of shame about the police coming to their home and what the neighbours are thinking about that. When he's very distressed, he hits his head with his fist or bangs his head against the wall. He frequently scratches and picks on the skin of his arms and legs and seems impervious to the pain or any bleeding. He hates bathing, he sleeps poorly, and he hoards food in his bedroom. He has episodes of wetting the bed still, and he often smells of urine and has some trouble around his cleanliness and hygiene. He's in grade 6 at school, and his school attendance is restricted because of some of the behaviours that play out in the schoolyard. And the school are introducing a range of punishments for the way that he engages in that behaviour. So he gets excluded from school, he gets excluded from classrooms, he gets excluded from the things he enjoys the most, such as sport and excursions. He often refuses to follow instructions at school and will leave the classroom and wander the school grounds. His academic performance is about 2 years below his age level. And if those of you that remember back to primary school or have kids in primary school, in the first 3 years of school, from prep to grade 2, kids learn all the fundamentals, ideally. They learn how to read, write, do some maths, sit still, follow instructions, line up, all of those important things in schools. And then from grade 4, they have to apply all those skills. So the expectation is that they've got them, and now they can apply them, and they can work in groups, and they can start to analyse and synthesise and write beautiful stories. For kids who didn't get those fundamentals, often from grade 4 up, you see an escalation in behaviour in the classroom. We might wonder why that is. It's unlikely to do with the fact that they suddenly want to destroy things. But maybe it's worthwhile us trying to remember what might be going on for this young person. Is this person scared? Is this person terrified of being shown up? Is this person getting comments from their classmates around the fact that they're dumb or they're stupid? He doesn't have any established friendships at school, and rather he spends his time online or with an older group of peers that he's met at the skate park. And we start to think about some points of vulnerability, I think, here as well. The staff at the school have concerns regarding the kids that kind of hang around the schoolyard at the end of the day and seem to be interested in Justin and that they wander off together. His interactions with his mum usually end in an argument and mutual rejection. And this often sees an escalation of challenging behaviour. And I think, again, this wouldn't be an unfamiliar story. So mum asks him to get off the PlayStation. He says no. She says no again. She maybe delves into her kit bag of how she deals with these situations. Each one not working, and we see increasing frustrations from the young person and the parent, where we end up escalating into violence. So introducing the thinking about Justin, and I guess I've given you a bit of a backstory on purpose, and kind of trying to headline particular elements of his story. So the question that we often think about when we meet young people like Justin is, but why do you do what you do? What's happened to you that leads to you to do the things that you do? Breaking things, hitting things, getting into fights with your mum, they're not things that usually bring joy to people's lives. So why is it that this young boy at 12 is doing these sorts of things that is potentially leading to him being pushed out of his family? So what we have to think about is, what's the age of this child? What's he doing at his age? Is he doing those kinds of things that other kids would usually be doing at the age of 12? What's been his developmental history? You know, we would ask questions of the family around, so when, you know, some of those early history taking, tell me about the pregnancy, tell me about the birth, who was around at different points in the young person's life, when did they first walk, all of those sorts of developmental questions and information to start to build a bit of a story about what might be some of the contributing factors to Justin's presentation. We know that there's lots of things that can impact positively and negative on a young person's development, both their physical development, their brain development, their relational development. And so when we're looking at those history-taking questions, we're trying to build a picture of what are the positive contributing factors to a young person's development, and what were the points in the young person's history that might have introduced some vulnerability or some challenges to the young person's development that might contribute to how Justin's presenting today. We're really interested in the environment, who's in the family, what's the home life like, what's a typical day in this family's life, what's going on with the girls in the family, what's stepdad's role, do they have a division of biological parents of each of the children, do the parenting of those children or the discipline of those children, or do they have a shared approach? How does that all work in their family? What's the more social context? What are the connections this family has within their community and their both their own family, but also into the extended community? We know Justin doesn't have many friends. What's this family's experience of friendship and social connection? And what are the cultural norms for this family? I haven't shared any information about the cultural background of this family, but again, we might be really curious about what's this family's intergenerational story. How does that potentially play into how this person's presenting today? What's the biological history of both the parents? Do they have a history of developmental difficulties or mental health difficulties or other challenges in their life? And how might that play into their parenting, but also maybe into the biological vulnerabilities for this young fellow? We know that trauma and neurodiversity both impact on how the brain develops. That again brings a different picture into strengths and weaknesses and the pattern of behaviour and presentation of a person. We also know that they can coexist. And for the young people that we work with, often they're coexisting. We know that people with neurodiversity are more vulnerable to trauma, and we know that early trauma experiences can mirror neurodiversity presentations. So it can be really complex. It can be really hard for staff and practitioners to tease out what's what and what might be going on for this particular person. We know that children who have experienced complex trauma are geared towards survival. I often think about my experience as an adult woman going out at night. I'm fortunate to live in the northern suburbs in Melbourne, and when I'm walking home at night, I am ultra conscious of who's around me. Who are those steps that are coming up behind me? Do they belong to? I have my own gendered lens on violence. Is that a footfall that's more likely to be a male, or is that more likely to be a female? Should I walk in the middle of the road? Is that safer or more dangerous? Do I get my keys out of my pocket? So even in that journey home, I'm not actually enjoying the walk home. I'm feeling stressed and anxious, and I'm primed for safety. And I've not grown up in a life with lots of repeated experiences of trauma, and I don't have a neurodiversity background. So if we think about the kids where they've been experienced repeated experiences where they're fearful for their life, where they don't understand the world in the same way as other people and often feel confused, then they are so much more likely to be in that heightened state all of the time. So they're already up at a 9 out of 10. They're not necessarily, when they're doing their PlayStation, feeling cool and cozy and happy. They might already be in a heightened state. They might be using that PlayStation to help them regulate. They might be using it to help them disassociate from what's going on around them. And so, as we know, all children are not the same. And the way in which they use their tools to regulate themselves will be different. And our challenge is for us to be investigators and try and work out what might be going on for each of these children. So if we go back to Justin for a minute, and share a little bit more about some of his earlier experiences. And some of this material might be disturbing. So again, just as Deb's already advised, make sure you look after yourself. You're free to leave the room if it's feeling a bit much, or take a break. So Justin was conceived when his mum was sexually assaulted when she was 17 years old. So already we've got a significant trauma that was there from the second he was conceived. His mum had been homeless at the time that Justin was conceived, and she'd left home when she was 16, following ongoing conflict with her mother. So we start to see some intergenerational patterns emerging here. She wanted things to be different for her child. She wanted to be a different mother than what she experienced. She wanted to be able to give her son an experience where he could remain home until the point that he was developmentally ready to leave home. And it's not turning out that way for her. She had been using quite a bit of marijuana and alcohol prior to him being conceived. She says that she stopped both of those substances when she found out that she was pregnant, which was fantastic. It was a few weeks into the pregnancy before she found out that she was pregnant. We don't know whether the use of those substances had an impact on the developing fetus, but potentially it did. He was born 3 weeks premature and spent 7 nights in special care nursery with lots of respiratory complications. So he had, if any of you have been into a special care environment, it's a pretty high stress environment, lights, machines, Bing, lots of different people. It's not quite the warm, nurturing, loving experience of an ideal newborn experience. The staff at the hospital where Justin was being looked after had some concerns about mum's capacity to look after him and made contact with child protection at that stage. And so child welfare services were involved with Justin and his mum from the very early days. So moving on a bit into his early childhood, there was lots of transience during his early childhood and infancy. Mum had lots of difficulty securing ongoing permanent accommodation. That hasn't got any better, has it? It's incredibly difficult for people with financial challenges to secure secure, safe accommodation. What does that do for a new mum and an infant as they're going through an incredible burst of development and exposure to all sorts of new experiences? There were multiple reports to child protection before Justin was 4 years old, with lots of concerns about mum's ability to set limits, her ability to set boundaries, her ability to adjust to his behaviour as he was growing up. So obviously children need a different style of parenting when they're 6 months old to what they need when they're 3 and when they're 5 and then when they're 12. Justin's mum was still a really young person herself. Remember, she was 17, not even an adult herself, and then thrust into the experience of parenting an infant with a template for parenting that maybe was less than ideal to begin with. So the ongoing behavioural difficulties continued for Justin throughout his childhood. He was expelled from his first primary school, and he's had regular periods of absenteeism. So he's missed some really critical learning opportunities around those basics of literacy and maths. Again, might give us an inkling into why he might have some outbursts and leave the classroom sometimes in grade 6. So coming up to almost where we are now. So at 11 years of age, he was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He was also given a couple more labels just for good measure, as it can happen to young people in our world. He got oppositional defiant disorder, which really is just a description of how he's described, but also more importantly, depression as well. I'm not such a fan of the conduct disorder group of descriptors. Depression, I think, gives us a whole lot more information about what might be going on for this young fellow. So we've got a developmental diagnosis of attention deficit disorder, and we've also got a depression as which illustrates the struggle that he's having in his everyday life, and how his mood is probably really playing into the explosive behaviours that occur. So developmental screening, I believe, is a really key part of our work. I'm an occupational therapist, so obviously I'm going to say that. But I think it is really crucial that we understand about the strengths and vulnerabilities for the young people that we work with. We need to play to the strengths. We need to really elevate the strengths for the young people that we work with and find the ways to help them accommodate to the challenges that they're experiencing in their development. Relationships. We've heard a little bit about Justin, that his relationships in his childhood to date have been transient. He's been expelled from schools. He's moved house a lot. He's not embedded within a community as you would hope a 12-year-old is. He doesn't have any friends at school, so he's really isolated. And again, he's at the point of his family saying that they don't want him to live with them anymore. Relationships are the thing that bring the joy to our lives. We all have our fun times with our friends and with our families. They're also the people that provide us with that unconditional positive regard, that tell us that we're good enough, that we're worthy, hopefully that we're also fun to be with. But if a young person in particular doesn't have that, how do they make sense of who they are? And we heard this morning from Murrindindi about the importance of his connection to culture and his connection to his kin, and what a difference that made in his own life as he grew up. It's very similar for the young people that we work with. So we need to understand about those relationships, the history of relationships, and how does this young person in particular understand them? One of the tools that some of our staff use is, lots of you would do a genogram. What we're looking at here is a diagram that's a little more complex, that's thinking about the strength of the relational connections that the young person has to the people around them. So they can put anyone they like in this diagram. It's not just the people that they live with, whoever they feel a connection with, and you can use different, textures or whatever for the young person to illustrate the strength of those connections. We know that the more healthy, strong connections that a young person has, the better that they'll do in their life. A lot of our work is geared towards rebuilding or bringing in other people into the young person's relational network to strengthen not only who they see themselves, but making sure that there's a whole lot of people that have got their back, and let them know that they're a good enough person and that they're okay. The window of tolerance is another concept that we talk about a lot, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. When I'm really heightened, walking down the street with the keys in my hand, people talking to me about the logic of the situation, about the rates of harm that have been done to women in Northcote in the last whatever time, actually isn't actually going to get into my brain. I'm not in a state of mind that I can actually take in any cognitive information. I'm in a fight or flight state. So I can't actually make use of any smart information. However, if someone came up and walked beside me, someone that I trusted, took my hand and walked with me and helped me to move into that window of tolerance, then I could potentially take in the logical information. The behavioural strategies, the information about the likelihood of harm being done to me, all of those sorts of things that we might want to talk to teenagers about. So we need to work towards regulation and helping kids to feel regulated in the moment, and even more important for kids from a neurodiverse background. it's not going to work if people are heightened, if they're really stressed. The calmer we all are, the more rational we are, and the more we are able to think. So just to finish off on that point, so we need to calm our bodies first, and we need to, before we can calm our minds, to be ready for information and ready for change and ready for all of the amazing work that you do with young people. We need to connect. Connection is crucial, particularly for young people where connections may have been really fraught or difficult or broken. And then we communicate. So we need to regulate, connect, and then communicate. And that's it for me today. Thank you, everyone.